Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinnells, and tonight we are going to be talking about psychic mediums and their failures. But more than that, really, we're going to kind of expose them in a general way. We're going to be talking about famous psychics, and we're also going to be talking about some less well-known psychics, but all of which have some great clips that I was able to pull from YouTube, and we're going to dissect them and discuss them and figure out exactly what's going on with them. Because wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where our loved ones who had passed on were never really gone? And not just in the sense that we feel that they're watching over us or that they live in us or that kind of thing, but I mean like they were literally right next to you, maybe not at all times, but, certain times, and whispering in your ear and providing comfort and guidance throughout your life. And if only you had developed these, certain abilities, you'd be able to hear them. And if you can't do it yourself, at least there's people out there who can, and you can contact them and have them do it for you. If it's a yes or no question and we just need to take a vote on it, I vote yes. I want that to be true. I've got a lot of dead people in my life that I would love to hear from and to be able to talk to and get advice from. But is it actually true? Is it something we can really count on? That is what we're going to discuss tonight. And if you listen to the show, you already know my thoughts. But we're going to go in with an open mind, and we're going to listen to these tapes together and see what we can see. Before we dive into that, of course, I got to plug the website, spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. Both of those will take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page, where you can find pictures and sometimes outtakes and video clips. Sometimes. For this episode and any other episode, all the episodes are listed there. You can go back and listen to the old ones. You can also find links to our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on both Twitter and Instagram. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. All right, with that out of the way, let's get our psychic investigation underway. I told you before I was going to tell you my thoughts on psychics, and this is what I'll say. I won't completely say that there's no possible way that psychics or mediums, we're going to say psychics or mediums tonight for the most part, but we mean any kind of psychic ability. Don't get nitpicky with me. I know the diehard believers are going to tell me this is this and that is that, and you can't call an empath a psychic, and you can't call a psychic a medium, and they're all different things. I know, I understand. But for the general public, this is what they're known as, this is what we're going to call them, okay? In fact, tonight we're mostly going to be dealing with what they would call mediums in general. I have never seen solid evidence for the existence of any kind of psychic powers, including the ability to get messages from the dead in any way, shape, or form. And I'm sorry, but the kind of evidence that I'm usually presented is what you would call anecdotal evidence, meaning this happened to me, this happened to a friend of mine, how do you explain this? Well, anecdotal evidence is not really evidence at all. So, sorry. No matter how reliable the psychic at your friend's birthday party was, that's not what we're going with. So, my hypothesis is that psychic abilities, such as the ability to speak to the dead, do not exist. However, I'm willing to be proven wrong. If you're out there, come at me. Well, you might say, if you were a true believer, there are plenty of psychics and mediums and clairvoyants and empaths and all of those kinds of people on television all the time. Hell, Eric, you work in Salem. You're surrounded by these people day in and day out when you're doing your witch finding. That is very true. And yet, despite the many YouTube videos I've watched, despite the television shows I've watched, despite the readings I've seen done in person, I have not seen anything that I would consider proof of the paranormal. Judging by what I've seen on television and in real life so far, speaking to the dead should, at best, be considered kind of an improv game. Now, it's important to remember that in an improv game, the players are not playing against each other, but with each other. Player 1 is the medium, and it's their goal to get bits of information out of player 2. Player 2 is the bereaved, hoping to make contact with a dead relative. Player 1 can attempt to get this information in a variety of ways, but most commonly, they will use wildly generic guesses that Player 2 will then work very hard to make applicable to their own life, and hopefully add even more information that Player 1 will use later on. In actual improv, this would be called the yes and rule. You don't say no when someone gives you a suggestion in improv. You say yes and. I'll give you an example. Player 1 could say, "There is someone beside you whose name starts with a J sound, like Jeffrey or John." Player 2 may then respond, "My father's name was Jonathan." Now, what Player 2 has just done is they've confirmed that they know a dead person whose name started with a J sound, and they've added the information that this person was their father. Player 1 will then state these facts back to Player 2 saying, "Ah, see, your father is here with you, and I knew his name was Jonathan." Now, of course, they didn't exactly say all that, but Player 2, if they're a good sport, will work it around in their own mind to say, yes, they did know. This is a very wise medium. Player 2 will then become very excited at the prospect of speaking to their dead father. Player 1 will make another wild guess, and gameplay continues like this until Player 1 feels they have made enough guesses and mined enough information out of Player 2 to convince them that their powers are legit, and will then wrap up the game by saying something nice and comforting like, "Your father is always with you, and he always loved you. He's by your side now, and he'll be waiting for you when you cross over many years from now." Unfortunately, unlike a real improv game, only one of these players knows it's a game. Psychics prey on some of our most primal emotions and fears, and for this, they deserve to be held up to an extraordinary level of scrutiny and, in many cases, ridicule. See, it's not all that hard to learn the rules of the psychic improv game, and once you've learned them, you can spot the tricks they use pretty easily. If you enjoy watching television psychics and don't want the experience ruined for you, you better turn off this episode now. But if you're more interested in the truth, if you want to learn their nasty little tricks, this is the show for you. One of my very favorite things to do is watch psychic fail videos on YouTube. Just go ahead and type that phrase into YouTube. There's certainly no shortage of them, and I'm going to play you several tonight. But I won't just be pointing out their flaws. I'll also stop and expose the tricks that they use, and I'll discuss their presentation and how good or bad it is. And of course, we'll laugh along the way, as they get it all wrong. Now, I won't waste too much time on her since I already did a whole episode about her, but she's such an easy target. How could we not start with garbage person Sylvia Brown?
I lost my boyfriend tragically a few years ago. They never found him. And I've had such a hard time since. Every day.
The reason why you didn't find him is because he's in water.
So what just happened there is there's a woman in the audience. This is from the Montel Williams show. There's a woman in the audience who's talking about a loved one she's, has passed on and they can't find him and she's had a hard time. Sylvia Brown says, "Well, you can't find him because he's in the water." Now, here's the thing. When you watch a lot of these TV psychics, especially when they're trying to solve missing person cases or solve a crime or something where they can't find the body, you will hear them mention water. Listen for it. Almost every time you will hear mention of water, sometimes of railroad tracks, and then they'll say, yes, see, you found the body near water. I was exactly right. This is a little bit different because she claims that it's underwater. Now, what Sylvia has done here is she's made a guess, and in general, this would be a pretty good guess. After all, if somebody's body has gone missing, you would think it would be found on land or something like that, but this woman clearly said that they can't find his body. So that sounds like maybe someone who fell off a boat or something like that. So Sylvia's made a guess. The only problem is she's made a very specific guess. She said that this body is definitely under water. Well, let's see how that worked out.
And find him in water, it's like the girl that's missing in Aruba. You can't find somebody.
Well, it was September 11th. There was no, he was a fireman, but there was
no, see, I keep seeing him in water.
Oh, Sylvia, you fucked that one up pretty bad. Yes, a 9/11 widow, a husband who was a hero going into the buildings on 9/11 trying to save people, and somehow this psychic medium, Sylvia Brown, the great psychic medium who speaks to angels and all that nonsense, she was unable to tell that. And then, in fact, she just says, no, I see him underwater. Continue, Sylvia.
Is there any way he could have drowned in water some way?
They never found a piece of him. Nothing.
From 9/11.
Because he says he couldn't breathe and he was filled with water.
You see what she did there? She's changing it up now a little bit. Before she was saying, oh, he's lost in water, he's underwater, they won't find him, I don't care because he's underwater, they won't find him. Now she's saying, oh, well, no, he's saying he can't breathe and that he was taking in a lot of water. Continue, Sylvia.
Well, if they were trying to put the fire out, Montel.
They could have, yeah.
All right, two things right there. Is this bitch actually suggesting that he was drowned by friendly fire from a fire hose? So maybe fire is not the right word, but you know what I mean. He was drowned with water from a fire hose as they were trying to put out the flames on 9/11. Even Montel can't fully back up this whack-ass theory. She looks at him for reassurance and he just says, yeah. As we talked about before, Montel has to know that this is all bullshit, but he had her on constantly. So why would he do that? Well, she must have got good ratings. That's a cash cow. It's unfortunate, but that's how the world works sometimes. Sylvia, try to wrap this up. Try to talk yourself out of this one. Let's see what you got.
No, they won't find him, but honey, that's okay, because it doesn't matter if they find him or not, he's still over there.
I'm sure that she meant that to be a lot more comforting than it sounded, because it doesn't matter if they find him or not, he's still over there. What is that supposed to mean? He's still buried in the rubble? I don't know. I think she meant he's over there in heaven, maybe. He's doing fine now. That's, she's trying to put a nice little bow on it and talk her ass out of it, but it ain't happening, Sylvia. You were a garbage person, undoubtedly, in my opinion, and you were scamming people your entire life, and I hope that the money that you made you happy. I said I wanted to address the presentation that these psychic mediums offer up, and I think it's an important thing because this is, after all, a form of show business. And ladies and gentlemen, you longtime listeners, you will know that I am, by training, a song and dance man. So I know a little something about the performing arts. Now, let's take a look at Sylvia Brown. As we do, please keep in mind, I'm not really, although I'm going to be talking about her looks and her voice and all that kind of thing, I'm not talking about the person. I'm talking about the package she is presenting as a person on television, as an entertainer. Now, she is dead, but if she was alive, she might tell us, well, I'm not an entertainer. I'm a angel miracle worker that talks to angels and dead people, and I, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But you're on television, you're presenting this, what I would call a character. So let's think about Sylvia Brown's character. Now, on the surface, you might say, for television, this is a rather unappealing character that we have in Sylvia Brown. She is not what I would consider attractive, and I think most people would agree with me on that. I'm not saying she's a hideous monster or anything, but she is not a supermodel by any means. And then that voice. She's got that smoker's voice. Talk like this. Like one of the sisters from The Simpsons, right? But, on the other hand, she is very unique. And in showbiz, that counts for an awful lot. If you can be a unique and memorable person, that counts for something. And of course, what she's trying to do does not require you to be a good-looking person. No one cares if the person talking to their dead loved ones is an attractive person or not, or has a pleasing voice. Those might be bonuses if they are true. We'll get to some of them later on. But it's not necessarily required. So, in this case, I think Sylvia Browne actually has kind of a good character. But I will say, and I said this on the whole episode about her, so I won't spend too much time on it, but she's not very good at her game. There's video after video of her getting things wrong. She makes too many specific guesses, is the problem. The better psychics won't get into anything that specific. They speak in generalities. She would speak very definitively on very famous cases, and it always came to bite her in the ass. I couldn't find very many examples when I did the episode about her of her being correct on something, on a famous case that she talked about. I advise you to go back and listen to that episode, especially if you enjoy this episode. You're going to learn a lot more about good old Sylvia Browne. So final grade for Sylvia Browne, I would give her overall presentation maybe a B. I would give her actual gameplay, if we're considering it like the improv game, I would give her gameplay an F. She's pretty bad at it. She's way too specific, way too available to get things wrong. And yet, ladies and gentlemen, it did not stop her from becoming very wealthy off the grief of people just hoping to be able to talk to a loved one. This next clip kind of speaks for itself, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but it's from a news report where they gave a psychic who said that she could, help solve a murder mystery, a picture of the reporter who's very much alive as a child, and to see if she would pick up on that. So let's go to that tape now.
I've been in business with this for over 30 years.
So we decided to see what would happen when we asked a psychic detective to help solve a missing persons case. Posing as the distraught brother of a missing child, we sent our producer, Charlie McElravy, to meet with Lori McQuarrie. We showed her a photo of this missing girl, and she agreed to take the case for $400. But what Lori didn't know was that the photo our producer gave her was actually a childhood photo of me. And obviously, I'm very much alive.
I don't believe she's alive. I'm sorry. I believe that it was a violent passing.
McQuarrie's sixth sense told her the girl was brutally murdered and sexually assaulted.
I think she was hit in the head with a rock.
But her vision didn't end there.
I think she can be brought home.
Pointing to a remote spot on this map, she even said she could help bring her body home.
It may even have been violent to her in there.
The next day, McQuarrie sat down for an interview with me to talk about the work of psychic detectives.
I just had a gentleman yesterday, 30 years ago, his sister disappeared.
She soon began talking about a recent case, but clearly her psychic abilities didn't tell her that I was the girl in the picture.
One of the first things I do in a case, Lisa, is I always make sure people know that if I feel the person is living or not.
So you'll always know when you talk to a family member, when you start a case, you'll know if this person is dead or alive.
And that's the point. Is that
every time.
Yes.
I just want to point out how much I love the reporter here. You can tell she is just about to dig right into this bitch. Oh, it's going to be good. And the damn psychic doesn't even see that she's being set up. That was clearly a setup, and she didn't even know. All right, let's see how this plays out.
But apparently her psychic abilities didn't see this coming.
Lori, I'm going to show you something.
Okay. Yes.
Does this girl look familiar?
Yes, she does. I work this case.
This is a girl who you said was beaten and killed.
Okay.
This little girl is me. And you told somebody that she's dead.
Wait a minute. You didn't disappear?
I'm right here.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
How do you explain being
I
completely
can't
wrong?
explain it. I can't explain it.
You're charging them hundreds of dollars.
You know what, dear?
Hundreds of dollars. You're taking advantage of desperate people with a bunch of hocus pocus, aren't you?
No, I'm not. Thank you. It's been an interesting experience. You all have a lovely
You didn't disappear? Oh, boy. I love that reporter so much. She did a great report right there. Also, I want to point out, she says, when she holds up the picture, she says, do you recognize this picture? And she says, yes, I worked on this case. It's the case you just referenced earlier, bitch. Why didn't you mention that? Because she didn't remember. Because she doesn't know. Because she only wants the money. Psychic detective, my ass. Now, there's not really much to point out in her technique because they didn't really show a ton of it, aside from the fact that, you know, they showed her a map and said, oh, they think the body might be in here somewhere. And then she said, well, it's probably going to be right about here in this remote area. Of course, it's going to be in a remote area because if it's a missing body, it's probably not going to be in a high-trafficked area. And then she says, well, maybe within a mile or two from here. Okay. All right, who's next? Up next, we have James Von Prague. Now, this guy, he's kind of famous. Like, he's been around for a while, but he's always been kind of like a D-list celebrity psychic. Like, you do see him on TV. He's on specials and stuff like that. He's had his own show here and there, but he was never on the level of a Sylvia Browne or even a John Edwards. He's just kind of like a background TV psychic guy. And I think this next clip is going to give you a big clue why. He's appearing on a TV show, and he's going to do a cold reading for the audience. And it's not going to go so great for him. I have a hunch.
I'd like to start with this lady right here who's sitting right in the first row. I have a mother figure very strong coming around you. Okay?
All right, let's stop right there. Do you see what he did there? I feel a very strong mother figure coming around you. He didn't say your mother. He said mother figure. That is a vague question, even though he doesn't frame it as a question. That's a vague question that he's going to try to get a response from. So if he says mother figure and then her eyes kind of widen, he might figure, oh, this is the mother. Or he could, in that way, he gives himself an out because he could mean an aunt. He could be a kindly neighbor. It could be some kind of mentor in their life. All of those things could be a motherly figure. Go ahead, James.
And the name of Mary Margaret in the name? Margaret Mary. Okay, Margaret Mary.
He did just pull two names out that seem to make sense to the audience member, but he doesn't say this is their name. He says, do you understand this name? Another weird opening that he leaves himself to be a little bit squirmy if he needs to be. In this case, it's a little bit unclear. It seems like he doesn't have to be squirmy because he says, now I forget, was it Margaret Mary or Mary Margaret? Whichever one he says, the woman says the other way around. So he takes that as a hit, as a victory, as something that he got right. And then he kind of admonishes her, Mary, Margaret, Margaret, Mary, like, hey, I still got the names. But the thing is, if he's really talking to a dead person, or at least getting messages from a dead person, why does he get the name even a little bit wrong? This person all of a sudden can't speak right and doesn't know their own name in the right order? I do give him points for at least not just starting with initials and saying, I'm getting an M name, I'm getting an M name, or a J name, because that is very common. John Edwards was notorious for doing that, and there's lots of TV psychics who do that kind of thing. Now, the fact that he was able to pull out these two specific names, how could he do that? Well, either it could be what you call a bit of a cheat, which would be a hot reading, where he's had this information fed to him. He did pick this woman specifically right off the bat, so that's possible. Or it could just be that he chose two very common names, Mary and Jane. Those are pretty typical names, especially Mary. There's so many Marys. Even if it's not someone's first name, it could be someone's middle name, especially if you're dealing with Catholics or Christians of any sort. So that's a pretty good, reasonable guess. So it could be either one of those two things. Go ahead, James. Tell us more.
And I can tell you that before she passes over, there's a lot of hard time to get up and get things going. Do you understand that?
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. James Von Prague just gave us clear proof that psychic abilities do exist. After all, he was able to somehow deduce that a presumably elderly woman who has passed away may have had trouble getting in and out of bed before she died. Incredible. Incredible.
And I feel so arthritis, by the way. There's a lot of arthritis, and there's a bone problem. There's also something with the back. So I don't know if she has a pillow at the back of her, or is that you?
No.
Doesn't make sense to you? Okay, I want to try with legs.
No.
Okay.
Couple of swings and misses there, Mr. Von Prague. Yeah, now, of course, if someone is elderly, you might think that they have bone problems, as he vaguely states at first. Then he says first he says arthritis. Very specific. He does not get a hit reaction on arthritis. She does not acknowledge that that is true in any way, shape, or form. So he changes it to bone problems, very vaguely, bone problems. He still doesn't get a hit. So then he says, well, maybe she slept with a pillow, on her back. And again, no hit. So then he decides to move on to the legs. Maybe she's got trouble with her legs. After all, he did seem to get a hit. So he's going to figure there's some kind of problem there, and why not go for the legs? But he still doesn't get a hit there. So watch what he does next.
Who has trouble with the legs now?
Well, my father's had 2 hip replacements.
2 hip replacements. He cannot walk as well as he used to.
See, we were talking about the mom, but since he didn't get hits on the mom, he moves on to the dad. Oh, it must be the dad. Oh, hip replacements. Oh, yes, then that's the leg trouble. Guess what?
Oh, no, he walks very well.
Okay. Right. Was your mother buried?
Yes.
Yes, the amazing Von Prague has done it again. He has predicted somehow, through messages from beyond, that a dead woman was buried.
Mm-hmm. Because she's talking about being buried and about a wake, or a funeral, rather. And she knows about it. She was very surprised by it all. And who's Kathy, or Kathy? Is there Catherine, or Kathy? Catherine, or Kathy?
He has revealed that a dead woman who was buried had a funeral and a wake. What a shock. And then he takes a big swing and a miss with Kathy. Kathy. Go ahead, James. Let's see if you can dig your hole a little bit further.
I also know who's Catholic, but there's someone who's Catholic background. And
we all are.
You all are, okay.
Yeah.
So there was a mass said, for instance, wants to thank you for a mass that was said, and there are prayer cards that are said. There's a picture of Mother Mary somewhere around. Picture of Mother Mary. Would you know about this? Do you know about this? Picture
well,
of Mother
all
Mary.
Catholics have Mother Mary around somewhere.
Good, okay, well, I don't.
You know.
But of course, that was years ago.
That still goes on.
So...
Again, notice some vagary he tried to use there. He said he sent someone of a Catholic background, and then the woman volunteered that they are all Catholic. Now, he could have, later on, if he had had a little bit more success, he could have turned that around and said, like, oh, well, I did know that they were Catholic. Well, that's not what he said, actually, but that is how he would try to squirm it around. But then he goes on to say some things that, of course, would be true of most Catholic funerals. Yes, there's prayer cards. Yes, there's masses said for people. That's what Catholics do. And I love how unimpressed these people were with him pointing out that there might be a picture of the Virgin Mary in the house. As the woman points out, that is all Catholics pretty much would have that. And then he makes some kind of snide comment that's kind of hard to hear. He says, well, I don't have them. And then he says something that I couldn't quite understand, and they say something back that I also couldn't understand. But it seemed to be like a little joke of his to try to squirm out and, lighten the mood before he's going to swerve on to another topic, which is what he's about to do. So, let's go back to James.
I want to talk about something else with you, though. I said music. I don't know why about music. Did you not do music? Were you going to do music when you were younger and you stopped doing music?
No.
Okay, you never wanted to play the piano?
No.
Okay, who was that one to play the piano? Or music?
Don't know.
Don't know,
No
okay.
one in my family's
Okay.
musical.
That was a real big swing and a miss. No music in the family. No one's musical in the family. I had to cut him off mid-sentence there because guess what? He's going to do another swerve. As soon as he doesn't get a hit on music, he's going to move on to something else. By the way, do you notice how fast he talks? That is part of the trickery. That is so that you don't have time to process everything that he says. He's just waiting for you to latch on to something that he says. When he does, then he's going to go with that. And you're going to hopefully forget the 20 misses that he just did to remember the one hit that he got. The Long Island medium is very notorious for that, too. We'll get to her in a little bit, don't worry. But for now, let's continue with James. Go ahead, James.
I want to talk about this lady here. Your husband's passed over? Or your father's passed over, rather? Father passed over. I don't know if he liked cars. Don't think about cars. But there's something about cars with him. He told me about this, okay? I don't know if he just recently got a car, or there was talk about getting a car, or changing a car. Are you living or dead? Do you understand? Do you understand about the cars?
No,
Did you just get a car, or were there...
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
for a couple of years.
Okay. Who had the heart problem?
Oh, man. Can you imagine what was going on inside Von Prague's head right now? He is freaking out. He hasn't got a single hit this entire time, except maybe if you want to count the names. Oh, brother. Here we go.
Okay. Who had the heart problem?
Possibly my mum.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's passed over as well?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if there was a heart situation before she passes?
Yeah.
Okay, and there was situations that she was going to either get an operation or a procedure done, something before that, okay? So I don't know if you know that she didn't get that. I also want to ask who I'm with Teresa or Terry, but I am. Okay, I got to tell you that.
Sorry, what did you say?
Teresa or Terry.
Teresa?
Mm-hmm. Teresa or Terry.
That was an incredible string of misses, and he's quite upset about it. He's going to take it out on the person. Wait till you hear this.
And was there a divorce with you? Never. You never married?
No.
Okay. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because I want you to love yourself more. Because you don't. I need you to love yourself more. Okay?
What the fuck did you just say, bitch? You want to throw down right now? What the hell kind of attitude is that? Have you ever been... Oh, you were married? Oh, you were divorced? Oh, you were never married? Well, I'm not surprised. Really? Really? And then he tries to turn it around, try to solve, because you don't love yourself enough. And I need you to love yourself more. Now, anyway, back to the bullshit I was spewing. That's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to go right back to the cars. Check it out.
I also want you... There's something about the car here with your father. I don't know, but I'm talking about a car here. I don't know what it means. If you're just getting a new car, or he got a new car, there's something with that, okay? I got to tell you that. I'm going to come over here to this lady. Are we almost closed?
We're nearly there, just to see if you could feel anyone.
Your husband passed over, correct? Do you have his ring or his watch also?
Yes.
Are you wearing it?
Yes.
Thank you. You just told me that in my head, okay? So you're very open.
Now, obviously, he wasn't getting anywhere with that woman, so he moves on, and he asks about jewelry. Now, this is also something very, very common psychics will ask about, mediums will ask about. They'll mention jewelry. Oh, did so-and-so leave behind jewelry? It's very common for people to leave behind jewelry, or that you'll be given something. In fact, that's one of the only things I have of my mother's. She didn't give it to me herself, but I did ask my sister after she passed away. I said, hey, can I have one of Mom's things? And she said, yeah. So I have that, in a box somewhere. And that's very, very common. So that's why you'll hear things about jewelry. You'll also hear them mention money. Cars is pretty often, and sometimes houses too. But houses are a little bit too specific. Cars, there's lots of things people can do with cars, as you heard him list. Was he buying a car? Was he looking at a car? Were you looking at a car? Was he going to give you a car? Were you going to... And none of those were hits, by the way. But those things. So he hits with this jewelry, and then he rewards the woman. And he says, oh, yes, you're very open, implying that the other people weren't. Okay? But there is a difference with this audience and some of the other audiences we've heard before, people we've been talking to, because these were people that were just at a talk show, and their guest that day happened to be James Von Prague, who's a psychic who was doing a show in town. But they didn't go there to see a psychic. So these people weren't primed to believe or anything like that, which you might see in a regular show. If you're going to a show with a psychic medium, chances are pretty good that you at least somewhat believe that it might be possible that he's actually speaking to dead people. So some of these people might have been skeptic. Those first people he went to, the next woman, there's no one really feeding directly into it. So in this case, especially when you have a crowd that is full of at least partial believers, if not 100% true believers, you want to reward the good partner in the improv game, right? Oh, you're open. You're doing great. Whereas the other people don't get your attention. When we talk about Long Island Medium, that's another thing we're going to come back to. She's really good at that. Anyway, James, go ahead. Continue. You're doing so well. You named some jewelry that she might be wearing. Continue.
I want to talk about a picture that you had redone of him after he passed over, or you moved the picture of him, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. I also want to tell you that he's sitting right next to you on that, I don't know if you call it the couch. Do you call it the couch or the settee? But he's sitting there with you. He smoked cigarettes, did he? No, who's smoking the cigarettes? Are you smoking cigarettes?
Yes.
Would you please stop? Because he's there in the settee with you smoking the cigarettes. He's throwing me cigarettes, okay? And I don't know who Paul is, or Paulie, or Paula. The name Paul. You understand that?
Paula.
Yes. Who is that, please?
Friends.
Okay. He wants to say hello or thank you to them because they helped when he died. They were there. They were here. They were around. You don't know that.
When he hits on Paula, he thinks he's got it made. But then he says, oh, yes, he wants to thank Paula because she was really there for you after he passed away. And the woman's like, no. Paula must be a recent friend or something. That was pretty funny. So now let's review James Von Prague. I think basically he does the techniques actually better than Sylvia Brown and better than the psychic detective whose name I didn't even catch, Linda something, that we heard before. So he's pretty good with the techniques. He just had some really bad luck there. And he tried to get a little too specific too quick, I think, in some of those cases. But it was the pressure was on. The show was ending. He had to try to make his piece. He was trying to sell his show that he was performing later that night and trying to get people to come and buy tickets. And based on that performance, I don't know how well he did, but hey, this is how he makes his living. But even though he's got those skills in a way, how does he present them? He's kind of a, he's a well-kept guy, but he's kind of schlubby looking. He's a little bit overweight. He's got a mustache. He's got unremarkable hair. Really the mustache is his kind of defining feature, I guess, and that's really not such a big deal. It's not like a big curly mustache or anything like that would stand out. He really wouldn't stand out in a crowd. He's not particularly handsome, but he's not so ugly that he's going to draw attention in that way and be unique in that way. He doesn't have any kind of exotic look to him. He's just wearing, button-down shirt or whatever. He just looks like a regular guy you'd see on the street. He's got to get a gimmick, I guess, would be my advice to James Van Praagh. He's got to stand out a little bit more, and he's got to get some kind of gimmick. Now he's probably a little too famous for that. It's the same with John Edwards. He didn't, aside from being kind of younger and kind of, intense, he didn't really have a gimmick. And I think that, and because South Park did a really good episode where they exposed John Edwards and talked about a lot of the same things I'm talking about, that's why he was kind of a flash in the pan. He was really big for a couple years, and I think he still goes around and does it now, but he doesn't have his TV show. And he was kind of a phenomenon for a minute, and then he went away. All right, time's a-wasting, so I do want to talk about Long Island Medium and the Hollywood Medium, so let's get through them pretty quick. We might do a more in-depth episode on each one of them later on, but for now, let's just get through them quick. Let's start with Tyler Henry, a.k.a. the Hollywood Medium. Now, we're going to listen to a clip where he's on a TV show, and I only have the audio clip in front of me. I don't have the video clip that I took it from, so I forget exactly how many people are sitting in front of him, but there's a group of people, and he's doing allegedly a cold reading for these people. And the first part I'm going to play you is pretty amazing. Let's see if you can figure out why.
I'm going to bring through, I think, 2 people for you, which is good to keep in mind. I have a man who dropped out of a heart attack completely randomly, talked about how he had a valve problem. The emphasis with this is honestly that I don't think we could have really predicted this happening. So that makes sense for you?
Oh my god, yeah, this is crazy.
Okay.
You're definitely talking about my dad.
Right.
He passed away of a heart failure, completely unknown, overnight.
Your dad's definitely coming through very clearly. The individual coming through is acknowledging that they passed in what I consider to be a tragedy. Where does that make sense for you?
My brother died of a drug overdose.
Okay. Please know he is with your dad as well, of course.
Yeah.
They definitely connect. There's a reference to a name being passed down.
My brother was named after my dad.
Okay, that would be the connection. Perfect.
Yep.
Because I feel like we share the same name, we have that connection.
Yeah.
That's the way it's coming across.
Yeah.
The reason I call that clip in particular amazing is because he literally says nothing. Nothing at all that would be uncommon and strictly, particularly relevant to one person and one person only. When he mentions that someone died of a heart problem, heart disease is the #1 killer here in the United States of America. My own father passed away from a heart attack, so he would have been right about me too. But of course, I would not have immediately jumped up and said, "You must be talking about my dad." Now, he didn't say it was the guy's dad. The guy told him it was his dad. Then he makes a super vague reference. But sorry, he does mention then that the dad is coming through loud and clear. Well, if the dad's coming through loud and clear, why didn't you just say, "Hey, your dad is here"? Sorry, I'm a little mushmouth on this episode. I'm trying to get through things quickly, and also these people get me heated because they're lying, in my opinion. I have to keep saying that for these litigious motherfuckers. He then goes on to say that someone passed away in a tragedy. Well, that could be any number of things. And tragic how? Tragic in that the death itself was tragic. Tragic in that it was tragic for the person who lost the person. There's a number of different ways that a person could take that. And of course, once again, our willing participant in this improv exercise jumps right in with a yes and. And the yes and this time is, yes, I knew someone who died in a tragedy, and it was my brother who killed himself. So he adds 2 things there. I'm not doing this to pick on player 2, in this case, the man who lost his father and his brother. I'm just pointing out that these are the facts. This is what's actually happening. The so-called psychic is not bringing up this information. The volunteer is. And I certainly 100% understand the want and to a certain extent the need to believe that this might actually be happening, that there is someone talking to our dead loved ones. But just because we want it to be true doesn't make it true, and it's sad. But we have to be strong enough to use our rational thought and to counteract these measures and to call out these fakers when we see them, in my opinion. Now, of course, as soon as he tells him that his brother who committed suicide was the tragedy in his life, then he says, yes, of course, your father and your brother are together. Okay, well, why don't you just say from the beginning, hey, your father and your brother are here, and by the way, they had the same name. He doesn't even say that. He just says, I feel like there's a reference to a family name being passed down. That doesn't mean anything. That could be your last name. It could be that your middle name is your father's. You could be a junior. Who knows? In this case, it happened to be that the dead brother was named after the dead father. Now, that just happened, but as I said, it could have been any number of things, and he still would have been technically right. That still would have been a hit for him that he would have celebrated. So again, he has actually said nothing. He's using the most basic cold reading techniques. And it's understandable because this is a young guy. This Tyler Henry, he's only like 20, 21 years old. He's very young. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of his character in a little bit. But before we do, let's hear the reaction from the women back in the studio. So he was like, cold reading these producers and stuff backstage. And then they cut to the live section, in studio. And they heard the exact same clip that we just heard, but their reaction is a little bit different than mine.
Oh my gosh!
Wow,
you know what? When we know all about Alex and what he's been through, and I can't believe that you saw those things or felt those things, but you gave him what seemed like a peace. Yeah, it felt like peaceful.
And your job must be difficult because you're giving people these news that's hard sometimes.
It's about very sensitive subjects, and so it really puts a lot of emphasis on the delivery. But the goal is to heal.
Fuck you, Tyler Henry. You're an asshole, and I believe that you know that you're an asshole. That kind of reaction is what really, really gets up my craw. This playing along like, oh, well, you're giving comfort. You're giving comfort. First of all, he didn't say anything. He made some guesses. Then, I believe his name was Alex, filled in the blanks for him. So if anything, Alex gave himself comfort. And this lying that dead people are talking and coming back, in my opinion, this gets me so upset because I have so many loved ones that have passed on. And if you don't understand why this is wrong, trust me, that could be a whole separate episode. I believe I already talked about it a bit in previous episodes. But this is the lowest form of showbiz and a terrible, terrible, immoral way to make money. And this is coming from a street performer, ladies and gentlemen. All right, well, listen, he does do a little bit of a better job with his next reading. This is a different producer that we're going to hear from, again, in the backstage segment.
You also saw something with Jen, who's a producer of ours as well.
And she lost her mom, too. Okay, let's take a look.
She knew, like I had mentioned, that she was given permission to go, but she's also acknowledging very deeply that she actually tried to communicate. She's referencing right before that thankfully upon transitioning she was not conscious. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. She is also acknowledging very, very clearly that she knew that her hand was being held. And she is so thankful for that last interaction because that was something for her that she needed. And she did try to move her hand just a little, just to let it be known that she was there, okay? But she's very clearly very aware that happened, and that for her was the goodbye.
I didn't know if she knew that I was there with her at the end.
She did.
She seemed so out of it.
She was aware. She knew.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So here we have Tyler being much more specific and yet still being accurate for this woman. Now, it's possible that he just made a super lucky guess and then was able to read her body language because she immediately broke down crying. When he mentioned, well, she knows that she had permission to go. Maybe then he got some kind of clue in her physicality. Now, we missed the beginning, too, interestingly enough. They did not show us the beginning where he mentioned that this was the mother talking. He didn't say, this is for you, this is your mom. We joined this session in progress, mid-reading, so we don't know how he got into that information, and I'd be very interested to see it, because to me, that's going to determine whether this was a regular straight-up cold reading where he's using different clues to finish this reading, or if it's what we would call a hot reading, where he somehow got a little bit of information ahead of time. Now, if it's cold reading, like I said, he probably got into it in a sloppy way, which is why they edited it out of the show. And then he just happened to hit upon some lucky guesses. Guess number one being that her mother was in the hospital and dying, or perhaps that was part of the segment that they cut out. But then he said, she was given permission to go. Well, this is very common. If someone dies at the hospital, of course, you're sad, but you also want their suffering to end. This is also something that I have lived through. Not the dying part, but being the person at the bedside. And then he says that she held her hand. Well, that is also very common, so that could also be a guess. And his little story about her moving her hand and all that, and knowing that she was there. It's possible that this was all a guess, but this could also be, like I said before, hot reading. Maybe he got a little information ahead of time. Now, there's all different ways that could be done. It could be that a producer talked to this other producer, or one of his handlers or something, and just kind of slipped him this little bit of information. And it could be something as simple as before he sits down with them, people are just walking around saying, oh yeah, he's great. He talked to my mom one time. And then the woman says, oh, I'd love him to talk to mine. It was so sad when she passed away in the hospital. I was holding her hand, and I would love to know that she's okay now. Something as simple as that. Now he's got information he can use. He doesn't necessarily need it. It could be the cold reading technique where he sees the body language and then he goes further. So he gets a positive response and he wants to take it further. And that could be what happens. Because again, he doesn't actually say anything. We can't verify if her mother knew that she was there. She doesn't verify it. She doesn't say, she wants it to be true, but that doesn't make it so. And this is a good example because, if he's telling the truth and the spirit really is talking to him, but not telling him anything. You ever notice that when the spirits do talk, they don't say anything that couldn't be, it's always stuff that the person already knows, It's never like really useful information, and it's always like, well, I'm at peace now. Well, what does that mean? Tell us about the afterlife. What? They never do. They never do. They just say, oh, it's, he knew you were there and they're at peace now. Kiss my ass. All right. Let's talk about his character and presentation. Now, his character, there's a difference between him and some of the other folks. A, he's very young. B, he's a relatively good-looking guy, although he does remind me an awful lot of Hermie the Elf from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and also a little bit of Kevin from Home Alone, Macaulay Culkin. Young Macaulay Culkin, of course, not the modern-day Macaulay. And he wears a nice suit. So, as far as looks go, his presentation is good. His delivery while he's giving the readings is very pleasant. He's very gentle and subdued, which would be a good presentation when you're talking about, as he says, sensitive subjects. But he doesn't say anything particularly interesting to the first fellow. It looks like his technique is a little bit weak, although if he is doing a cold reading on the second woman, his eye, although she was an open book. She was wearing her heart on her sleeve. She was, bawling her eyes out. But even so, I'll give him points for being, see, there's my mush mouth again, for being able to read body language well and to react. Acting is reacting. And he does well with that. However, I think overall he's a little too relaxed in his readings. And I think demographically he's not going to last all that long. I could see a certain segment of the population I'm thinking of people that I know, and I don't want to name names or get into the types of people really, but generally speaking, I can think of some the folks that, really like Wendy Williams and, the Kardashians and like those kind of reality shows. They were probably into John Edwards back in the day. It's so funny because I really am thinking of a specific relative, and that's what I'm trying not to say. Okay. I'm just going to stop talking about it. But what I'm saying is, yes, I could see where he could be like a fad guy. I think he needs to be there needs to be some kind of spectacle involved with him, I guess is what I'd say. Now, I don't mean anything too great or grand necessarily, but some kind of oomph to the presentation, or he's going to end up a more handsome version of James Von Prague. Of course, part of the gimmick that he does have going for him is that he is the medium to Hollywood celebrities. So-called. I haven't actually watched his show, but the clip that they played on this particular show that I did not play the audio of here, but just before they got into interviewing him, they were showing him with Snooki. I don't know that I consider that a true celebrity. But being the, psychic to the stars would be a good gimmick if you actually had stars. Okay, let's move on to the one that probably gets me the most worked up, the Long Island Medium. The Long Island Medium is Teresa Caputo, and she is, her gimmick is that she's from Long Island, of course. If you're not from the United States, Long Island is a part of New York, and it has some prejudices against it, some stereotypes associated with it. It's a very thick accent. It's the coffee kind of accent that you hear people do in movies and stuff like that. And also, I don't know, what are the stereotypes of someone from Long Island? Maybe a little bit trashy. I'm not saying these are true, by the way, Long Island. I love you, of course. But I'm just saying these are the stereotypes. Trust me, there's plenty of stereotypes out there about people from Boston. Not too dissimilar, actually. Perhaps maybe Boston's considered a little bit more drunken and violent, but generally, rough around the edges, kind of the way Long Island is. So this is her gimmick, and she is on Anderson Cooper, and she's going to do some cold reading in Anderson's audience, which again is interesting, not a psychic audience. Let's see how she does.
So Teresa, you've been reading a lot of people, and as we went away, you said there was somebody else you were reading something else. So.
Somebody lost a spouse newly, and someone also lost a sister. And someone is also wearing the mother or grandmother's religious articles, whether if it's like a miraculous medal, a cross, rosary beads, or they brought them with them.
Already we can notice that Anderson Cooper mentioned that, you said you felt like you were getting a reading from someone else. It sounded like it was going to be a specific person. And then she rattles off a list of non-specific things. And there's even vagaries within the list that she names, which is already vague, because she says someone lost a spouse. She doesn't say someone lost a husband. She doesn't say someone lost a wife. She leaves the door open. It could be anything. Someone lost somebody. And then she lists like 3 or 4 other things that also have their own vagaries with them. So this is called shotgunning. She is shotgunning and looking for a response from the audience. Continue.
Who lost the spouse? I think I'm right. I'm right here. Is your wife departed? Yes. Your wife is departed? Yes. Okay, because she sat next to you, and she said, just sit down. Would that be her personality to tell you just, maybe don't speak up yet quite so much? Is that her wedding ring?
You hear her ask who has the spouse that has passed away, and multiple people in the audience raise their hand. She looks around, finding her player 2, and then she finally she settles on someone that she likes. Now, the reason she chose this person could be any number of things. But what's interesting about this guy is he is sitting with a woman. So she flat out asks, is it your wife that has passed away? And he says, yes. Okay. Now, she tries to put in a little bit of oomph here. This is what I was talking about, the Hollywood medium lacking. She's going to throw in a little joke here. And the joke is that the spirit is sitting next to him and telling him, sit down, don't be so anxious, that kind of thing. This is not a great joke, but this is like she's kind of relieving maybe a little bit of tension in the room. And this is one of her hallmarks. I actually think this works well for her. Now, this is not an amazing joke. This is just a stereotype of a wife, kind of henpecking a husband maybe. But the old thing like, oh, your wife's here and she's, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But at least she's trying to add a little something to her presentation. So she gets points for that. Unfortunately for her in this case, the joke doesn't really land. It doesn't get a big reaction from him or from the crowd. She could have, if they had made a laugh or something like that, she could have, gone along with it like, oh, isn't that always the wife? Always, something like that. But that doesn't work. So she immediately moves on. She went right to the wedding ring. Let's join that again.
Is that her wedding ring?
No, it's my mother's wedding.
Oh, it's your mom. Oh, because I heard the wedding ring. And that's your mom's wedding ring?
Yes, it is. This is my wife's wedding ring here.
Oh, you have the wedding ring.
Right there, she is trying to disguise a miss as a hit. She pointed to the woman sitting next to him and said, is this your wife's ring? And he said no. And she was like, oh, because she said that she'd been getting something about the ring, right? And then he says, that's my mother's ring. But this is my wife's ring. And he points to his own hand. He's wearing his wife's ring on his hand. And she said, oh, you have the ring. So now she's changing it. Well, yeah, she's implying that she knew there was something about a ring. But it was a little unclear. Even though she's supposedly talking to the dead people. Again, why can they not get the specifics right? They always talk in these vague terms. But something really interesting is about to happen. So let's listen to the next part.
But where is the chair? Why do I keep getting the thing with the chair? Do you still have her chair?
No.
Or did she have an issue with her legs prior to her passing?
No, she had her gall block.
Who had the issue with the legs?
A big swing and a miss for the Long Island medium there. She starts talking about the chair or an issue with the legs. Have you noticed this is the second psychic that has looked at an elderly person? This gentleman was elderly. And then has asked if the loved one that moved on had an issue with their legs or getting out of chairs or something about chairs or getting up and down. Seems like maybe there's a reason we've heard two different psychics ask about this problem. Like maybe it's a very common thing for elderly people to have such issues. Unfortunately for her, this person apparently did not have those issues. And the gentleman starts to mention something about the gallbladder, but as soon as he says gall and is hesitant, and she's actually missed on everything that she said. So even though she kind of transformed that first miss into a hit. So she's going to move on real quick. And she just immediately stops talking to him and moves on to the next person. But this is perfectly within her character because she's the Long Island medium. And one of the stereotypes from Long Island is they're a little pushy, they're a little abrasive, they're a little bit obnoxious. So she just moves right on from him. But it's all within her character. So of everyone we've discussed, she's actually got the best character. It's not a perfect character, but it does give her the excuse that if you're not being a good player too, she can move on. And she's that way because, hey, she's from Long Island. She also has she has hair like David Bowie in Labyrinth. She's got the Goblin King's hair. Just saying. There was actually a lot more from that Anderson Cooper clip that I wanted to play for you, but we are way over time here. The show is supposed to be about 40 minutes. Have you noticed I've been giving you extra long episodes lately? You're welcome. Sometimes I give you short ones, so it all comes out in the wash. But anyway, I was thinking about it a lot, and I was trying to think of, like, who would be a great psychic? Like, what type of person would be a great psychic? That they would have the character, they would have a look, they would have a delivery. Who would be good at that if they were able to learn the skills? And you know who it is? You know who I think would be an amazing psychic with the great character and everything, all the right pieces? Dolly Parton. Especially a younger Dolly Parton. No offense to her now. She's still actually very beautiful with the help of her surgeon, I'm sure, but that I don't hold that against anybody. If I had the money, there's a couple things I might get taken care of too. But I just think she has a good public image in general. She's got a lovely accent, a lovely down-home accent. She's got a very unique look, just overall. Of course, she has large breasts, which never hurts. And she just like, it would just be like a good down-home, like, and you know she'd deliver it well in a very comforting way. And she's got a spunky personality, and she happens to be a very talented lady. Now that brings me to my second point about Dolly Parton. She would never do this because she is a lovely and talented woman. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Trust me, I got a lot more that I could say about these psychics and other people that we could pull clips from and talk about how good or how bad they did. Like I said, there was more about the Long Island medium I wanted to play, some where she does well in her readings, to be fair to her. I still think she's full of shit, in my opinion, but we'll get to that some other time. Maybe we'll do a whole episode just about her. Until then, please check out the website, spookyas.com. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/spookyas. Please, please, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher or however you listen. And don't forget to share it with a friend. Until next time, don't be afraid.